What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I have an insanely strong Sunbracers build to show you. Back with the launch of Lightfall, I went into the Legend campaign with a different version of the Sunbracers build. It utilized Heat Rises, which essentially allowed us to have restoration times 2 up at all times, and followed a pretty strict gameplay loop of consuming your grenade and Phoenix diving just as we got a solar kill to give us resto times 2. But what if I told you I had a way more forgiving version of the build that allowed us to get unlimited grenades and melees while still allowing us to use Icarus Dash? And it still gives us healing as well, which is good because in the TWAB this week, Bungie just announced a nerf to restoration, even though it is still going to be extremely strong. They also gave us the info for all the artifact mods, which means this is basically my first build for next season. And it has been my absolute go-to for a long time now. I used it in day 1 Crota's End to keep me and my team clear of ads during the Ear Ute encounter, and it worked beautifully. I also used it in day 1 Ghosts of the Deep, and I may even use it for my first solo flawless attempt of the new dungeon coming next week. So let's jump into how it all works. It starts with the exotic Sunbracers, which have the exotic perk Helium Spirals. Increases the duration of solar grenades. Solar melee kills grant unlimited solar grenade energy for a brief time. It also doesn't state it, but they give your grenades intrinsic fastball, which is really nice. So I mentioned how the previous build had a whole gameplay loop built around Heat Rises. Well, this one doesn't use that aspect at all. So we get Icarus Dash instead. There really isn't much to this aspect, but it does give us nice movement for avoiding enemy fire or keeping momentum from a sword skate. But next we have the most important aspect, which is Touch of Flame. This aspect enhances our solar grenades, allowing them to periodically emit blobs of lava. So this gives our grenades more damage and better ad clear. And it also makes them last longer. So normally a solar grenade will last for 4 seconds, but with this aspect they will last 6. But then Sunbracers also makes the grenades last longer. So normally without Sunbracers, a solar grenade would last for 4 seconds, but with the exotic equipped it now lasts for 8. And because we have Touch of Flame, we get an additional 2 seconds to make it last for a whopping 10 seconds. So that means our solar grenades will deal a lot of damage over time. And this is especially significant because we have 2 artifact perks that will really benefit from this next season. The first one is From Whence You Came, where Taken and Scorn take increased ability damage. I mentioned to my clanmates months ago about how we have never had a Scorn dungeon, so I am betting we will this season. And I am sure some of the Grandmaster rotation will have Scorn and Taken in them as well, so this mod is going to be super strong. And the other one is Revitalizing Blast, where causing damage with a solar ability weakens champions and bosses for a short duration. Weaken is typically a 15% debuff, and this will probably last the whole time it is taking damage from the grenade, and then for a short time afterward. So theoretically, with the new dungeon boss, you can throw a grenade on it to get a pretty long weaken effect. And if there are ads around like in Ghosts of the Deep, you can probably proc Sunbracers with a melee kill to chuck more grenades at the boss, and this will help with ad clear. And if there aren't ads around, then you can use your Incinerator Snap to apply another debuff when the timer runs out. I like to run this build with Incinerator Snap because the snap can cause an ignition, which makes it much easier to get kills to proc the Sunbracers perk. But you can also run Celestial Fire if you like. On screen now are the numbers of Scorch each melee applies, and you can increase the amount of Scorch with the fragment Ember of Ashes. Not only will this increase the amount of Scorch your melee applies, but it will also increase the Scorch that your solar grenades deal as well, allowing you to get easier ignitions. This takes your total Scorch on Celestial Fire from 30 to 45, and on Incinerator Snap from 100 to 150. So you can still get an ignition with the snap without this fragment, but this just makes it way more forgiving. Also, Incinerator Snap has a shorter base cooldown, which is very important because you need your melee up as much as possible to be proccing the Sunbracers perk so that you can constantly chuck grenades. And one way we drastically improve our melee cooldown is with the next fragment, Ember of Searing. Defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. The fire sprites do have a 5-second cooldown, but basically you'll be creating them every 5 seconds if there are lots of ads around. And these reduce your grenade cooldown, which we don't really need anyways thanks to Sunbracers. So Ember of Searing is very important so that we always have our melee up to just keep proccing our Sunbracers. And because we are always chucking out melees, I like to run Ember of Torches where powered melee attacks make you and nearby allies radiant. So next season it will be very easy to get radiant from the artifact if you are running solar weapons thanks to Flint's Striker, but because this build has nearly infinite melees, then I would just run this fragment. And that brings us to the last fragment, Ember of Resolve, where Solar Grenade final blows cure you. This has definitely saved my life before, so in higher end content, I strongly recommend this fragment. We can't get restoration with this build because obviously we can't run healing grenades and we're not running heat rises, so this will be our source of healing. And trust me, it works very well. Speaking of healing, you can run a Healing Rift or Phoenix Dive with this build, whichever you prefer. In Day 1 Crota, I found Phoenix Dive to be super useful thanks to how quickly it can be cast. It would come in very clutch when Crota was trying to beam me when I was passing the Chalice. So that is it for the aspects and fragments, so now we go to the mods which crank up the potency of this build even further. On the helmet, we have 2 Ashes to Asset mods, which is pretty much a no-brainer. We are constantly using our grenades to clear adds, so we'll be getting wells super frequently. But even 1 Ashes to Assets mod would suffice if you would rather run something like Heavy Ammo Finder. On the gloves, Momentum Transfer and Bolstering Detonation are wonderful here. They proc numerous times thanks to how long our grenades last, and they give us melee and class ability energy back for dealing damage with our grenades. You also want Firepower to make orbs from your solar grenade kills. In the TWAB this week, they said that there is going to be a 10-second cooldown on the orb generation from these mods now, so it won't make the insane amount of orbs as it used to, but it will still make quite a few. On the robes, just whatever resistance the activity calls for. And on the boots, you can go a couple different ways here. You can run a recuperation for a chunk of health every time you pick up an orb, better already to start health regen when you pick up an orb, or both. These are for survivability obviously, though I don't find them necessary thanks to Ember of Resolve doing tons of work for us. You can also run Invigoration for a chunk of melee energy, Absolution to reduce all ability cooldowns, or Insulation for class ability energy. So you can choose what you like, but here's the awesome part. You can use these mods, and then when it comes to boss DPS, you can just hot swap to a loadout with triple surges on the boots. I do this in Crota all the time, where I have an ad clear build and then a boss damage build, because you have lots of setup time to swap to boss damage because you have to take his shield down with a sword. So what you can do is swap to damage right before DPS. I run triple Lucent Blades on the robes and triple Solar Surge on my boots with Lament usually. And this would be a good strat for the bosses of the new dungeon as well. Or if you are confident in surviving and don't want to swap, you can just run the surges of your choice the whole time. It really is up to you. And that brings us to the class item. You can run 1-2 Finisher, which will allow you to hold armor charges without them being used up. And if for some reason you don't have a melee to proc Sunbracers, you can just do a Finisher and this will give you melee energy so long as you have armor charges. You will get more energy back with the more charges that you have. However, thanks to Ember of Searing and Momentum Transfer, this is very rarely an issue if you are playing the build properly. I then have Outreach and Distribution on the class item for even more ways to get melee energy if I need it, because I can just Phoenix Dive or cast a Rift to get a chunk of energy back. And if you're doing the DPS swap, then make sure you have 1 or 2 time dilation mods on your bond for the DPS loadout. For stats, you can go with 100 Resilience and then as high of Recovery and Discipline as possible. The reason you want high discipline is a grenade doing damage can easily give you a huge chunk of melee energy back thanks to the fragments and mods, so you don't need to spec into strength really. But if you did want to, go ahead. But I've used this build in all manner of content and I never struggled to have a melee up and ready even with only 30 strength. For weapons, next season looks like it will be heavily focused on solar weapons, so probably run something solar. I have a Fatebringer with Osmosis and Adrenaline Junkie which goes very hard with this build, especially if you are running Solar Surges. And you have Adrenaline Junkie times 5 up at all times, so it is pretty much a constant 33% damage bonus, and hand cannons feel awesome these days. So yeah, run what you like. Sleeper Simulant is a favorite of mine, and Whisper of the Worm and snipers in general just got a big buff this season. Apex Predator always goes hard, especially in a fire team with Galahorn, and Bait and Switch Cataclysmic with 4th times the charm is great for sustained DPS. And of course, Parasite for burst DPS, and Lament for close range bosses. Again, the grenades in the build loop will do pretty much all of your ad clear, so you just need to worry about DPS when it comes to your loadout. Anyways, that is it for the video. Like I said, I've taken this build through the paces in all manner of content since Lightfall came out, and it shines in everything. And next season, it will only get better thanks to the artifact. If you made it this far, then I thank you so much for watching to the end, I really do appreciate it. If you want to see a bunch more awesome builds and helpful Destiny 2 content, then be sure to subscribe. And hit like if you enjoyed the video while you're at it. I look forward to the upcoming season and hope to see you there. Happy grenade spamming and take care.